to find and manipulate HTML elements, there are several different techniques that you can use. What we've used quite a bit is the ID, and that's document.getElement by ID, and then you give it whatever ID you're targeting. That allows us to retrieve the value of a single element. And we've used that quite a bit to not only retrieve the value of an element, but also to set the value when we've updated the contents of paragraphs, and we've also used it to style. So here I've got like a little interactive example where you can change the color and reset, and this is simply using ID. And this is the actual code I've used. And this is similar to what we've been doing all along. We can also target tags. And when you target a tag, you're going to use getElements by tagName, and then you're going to give it whatever tag you're targeting. And just be aware, if you give it an asterisk, a wildcard, it basically targets everything. So when you're targeting tags, because there are more than one, it's going to retrieve a node list. And a node list is similar to an array because it's multiple items that you have to subscript into the list in order to retrieve. And you subscript in beginning with a 0. But it is not the same thing as an array because you cannot use any of the array methods. Okay, so you subscript into a node list. It does have a length property, so you can find out how long the list is, which is super helpful because that would allow you to use a for loop to access everything that's in the list. And so I've got a couple examples for you to look at. And this is really short. We've got 4 different input tags here. And so we are looking at getElements by tagName, and we're looking at the input tag. And then we're just displaying a little pop-up that tells us, you know, how many input elements we have. So if I pop this up, and then I ask how many input elements, it's going to come back with 4 because this is 1, 2, 3, and this button is actually an input element as well. Okay, so there's 4 of them. This is a little different example. Here I've got a bunch of radio buttons. And then if they click on the submit button, it's calling a process function. And again, we are retrieving the input elements. So it puts it into a node list. And that node list is being stored in this element variable. And then we get into a little for loop here. And we're going to stay in the loop as long as I is less than the length of elements. So if I count the number of inputs here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically, as long as I is less than 5, then it's going to stay in this little loop. And so we're subscripting into elements, and we're retrieving the value. And the value then is going to be what I've set here for the value property. And then we're indicating if it's checked or not. And so if we run this, what that means is which one of these guys is turned on. So if it's checked, it'll have a value of true. And if it's not checked, it's going to have a value of false. So it's going to, each one of these is going to be in the node list. So it starts and it looks at this one. I'm going to hit submit so you can see what it looks like. So under 18 is the first one. Okay, that's the value that it's retrieving. We've got elements sub0.value. That's this one. And it's not turned on, so it's false. And then we go back to the top of the loop here. So now I is a 1, element sub 1 dot value. All right, that's this one. Okay, and so the value itself is set 18 to 25, so that is what you see here. Okay, and then it's asking, well, is it checked or not? Nope, it's false. So then we get to this one, and you can see the value is 36 to 49, and this one is checked. So you see 36 to 49, and that is set to true. Okay, so again, it's bringing in a node list, and then we can use a for loop to access the values and to check if it's turned on or not. And here's just another example of just another type of list. So here we've got an ordered list, and we've got several line items. And we've got document.getElements by tag name, and we're looking at the li tag here. And so we're going to stay in this little loop as long as we are less than the length of the list. And there's 4 items in the list. And so it's basically going to print out whatever's inside the HTML. So what that means is we've got our list, and it's looking at the li tags. So whatever's between the opening and closing li, that is your inner HTML. So first time through, it's going to subscript in with a 0, and it's going to display John. Then second time through, it's going to subscript in with a 1 and display Ringo, subscript in with a 2, display Paul, subscript in with a 3, display George, and it goes back up and it becomes a 4. Well, a 4 is not less than 4, so it's done. And if you want to see this run, and you can see we've got, I'm going to have to reload that. It just went too fast. Here we go. John, Ringo, Paul, George. Okay, so that was get elements by tag name. Now you can also find elements by a CSS class name. And if you remember, a CSS class can be applied to more than one element. So if you wanted to see which elements had a particular class applied, this would make sense. And because it can retrieve more than one thing, it's going to retrieve a node list. So this is very similar to getting it by the tag name, except for you're using the class name and you have to tell it what the name of the class is. You're going to get a node list, and then you're going to subscript in. And in this case, we're actually updating some content. And here we've got another little example. In this one, it's targeting 2 classes. So we want to know what elements have the example and the color class applied. So it's not going to be including the first one. Okay, it's only going to be including the second and third. So our node list is going to consist of these 2. Okay, and then it's just telling you the number of elements that have both those classes applied. And we're actually going through, we're doing a little loop, and we're going to change the background color. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one in a new tab, and we're going to hit try it. Right now, the background color is not changed. And there's 2 elements, and you can see that those 2 had the background color changed, because those were the 2 that were in the list that we're targeting. So we can also find elements by CSS selectors. And we can use query selector all. And so you can see here, we can do it by paragraph tag, or we can do it by class. And this is a little different than when we just said by class name, because here when you're using the selector, this is the actual selector that you key into your CSS. Okay, so when you're creating a class, you have to do dot followed by the name of the class. So that dot with the name is what you have to put in here for the selector. Okay, and another little unique thing about here is that you can do multiple selectors. And this is also going to retrieve a node list. It's going to retrieve more than one. So not only can you do selectors, you can actually do attributes as well. So this is actually a pretty flexible command, depending on what it is that you want to retrieve. If you wanted to include the CSS combinators, you can do that too. And if you remember, probably the easiest one to remember is the space. So if you wanted to target, for example, all paragraphs within a section, okay, you'd say section space P. Or if you wanted all paragraphs within a particular class. So if we had the example class and we wanted to target paragraphs, it would be .example space P. Okay, and then we've got all of the other combinators as well. And then I've got some examples using query selector all. And this wildcard of an asterisk is targeting all nodes. It's going to retrieve everything. So just looking at this code, we've got document query selector all. It's targeting everything. And so here we're going into a loop. This is not going to be a very large page, I can tell you that. And so basically it's saying the node equals, and then it's basically giving the name of the node. And we can take a look at this. So here we've got a little links collection, and if we wanted to view the entire node list, you can see node equals. So the first one was an object. Let's see, the HTML element. So this in your code, what it's referring to is this. Okay, and then we've got the head element. It is referring to this. Title element, you can see when you do query selector all, it's going to give you absolutely everything. Okay, so this is going through the entire page, and this isn't even a big page. So you probably would not want to choose the asterisk on a very large page. And let's see. We've got another little example here. So we wanted to see a node list with the heading tag and a node list with the paragraph tag. That's what our two buttons are. And so when they click on the heading list one, we're calling a little function called view heading list. They click on the paragraph, we're calling a function called view paragraph list. So here's view heading list, here's view paragraph list. And so we've got a contents variable, and we've got a little heading here that's formatted. And then we are doing document.querySelectorAll. You can see that we've got all of the different heading types here that we're targeting. And so then we get into our little for loop, because all that it's going to retrieve are those items that match. Okay, so what we have here in nodes are all of the headings. So then we've got node equals, we subscript in and grab the first one. And then we're grabbing the content between the opening and closing. Okay, so in this case, we're dealing with headings. So what's between the H opening and closing H1? is going to get displayed here. And this is doing something similar, but it's for paragraphs. Okay, so here we're formatting a little heading that's going to display. Here is where we're generating the node list. And here we are looping through that list, and we're retrieving each paragraph, and we're displaying what the contents of the paragraph is. We're adding it to our content string, and then we're basically updating the page. So we'll take a look at this. So here we've got our two buttons. So if I click on this one, these are all of the paragraphs. And you can see that the node is an object. It's a paragraph element. Okay, and so here is the paragraph. This is the contents of the paragraph. So if I right click and I view the page source, here is my very first paragraph. Okay, and that is web-related coursework at NMC includes. That is precisely what it retrieved. Okay, this is my second one. This course introduces students. So if I look down here, this isn't a paragraph, that's a heading. Here is my next paragraph. And that is precisely what was retrieved. And now we'll take a look at the headings. And so this is just saying it's an HTML heading element. It really doesn't tell you which one, because if you remember in our code, we said, well, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. So it could be any of them, okay? So basically, when we look through here, our first heading is located here, okay? And that is what it's displaying for content. And kind of looking through, we're looking for our next heading. It's right here. Okay, so you can kind of see how that works. Here's another example, and you may want to do something similar to this one on one of your exercises in the assignment. And so basically all this is doing is we are now targeting paragraphs and we are making style changes. So we've got a couple buttons, change all the paragraphs to green or change the first and second to blue. And they click on the first button, it goes through this little function here. And you can see that we are targeting all paragraphs. We've got the node list here. And we've got a little for loop where we're basically going through each paragraph and we are changing the style color to green. If they click the second button, we're still using document query selector all and with the paragraph. Okay, we're still retrieving a node list of all paragraphs, but instead of using a for loop, we are just changing the first and the second paragraph. So we're subscripting in with those hard-coded numbers so that we only change two of them. So if you want to see how this works, if we click on that button, all paragraphs, anything with the P tag gets changed. And if we do the second one, only the first and the second are changed.